A single gunshot echoed across the dusty streets of Stockton, California, causing Felicity Vargas to flinch as she forced yet another smile for the weathered faces of the saloon patrons who hadn't noticed her momentary lapse. It was 1878, and like most evenings at the Golden Eagle Saloon, the air hung heavy with tobacco smoke, whiskey fumes, and secrets her own being the heaviest burden of all. Another round for the gentleman at the corner table, Miss Felicity. Called Hank, the aging bartender whose kind eyes had been her only comfort these past 3 months. "Coming right up," she replied with practiced cheerfulness, balancing the tray of whiskey glasses with the same precision she balanced her precarious existence in this frontier town. Felicity moved through the crowded saloon, her emerald green dress swishing softly against the sawdust-covered floor. At 22, she possessed a beauty that drew appreciative glances, but it was her unwavering smile that truly captivated, a shield crafted from necessity rather than joy. No one in Stockton knew who she really was, or why she had appeared on the stagecoach one spring morning with nothing but a small carpetbag and determination burning in her eyes. The Golden Eagle's doors swung open, bringing with them a gust of evening air and the imposing figure of a man Felicity had never seen before. He stood well over 6 feet, his broad shoulders filling the doorframe as his piercing eyes surveyed the room. Unlike the other cowboys who frequented the establishment, there was something refined about him despite the trail dust coating his dark clothing. His face, partially shadowed by a charcoal-colored hat, remained impassive as he made his way to an empty table in the corner. "New face in town," muttered Hank beside her. "That there's Vaughn Ryder. Heard he bought old Jacobson's ranch last month. Keeps to himself mostly." Felicity nodded, arranging her features into their usual pleasant expression as she approached the stranger's table. "Welcome to the Golden Eagle, sir. What can I bring you this evening?" Vaughn Ryder looked up, and Felicity felt an unexpected jolt as their eyes met. His were a startling shade of blue, clear and perceptive, the kind that seemed to look straight through pretenses. For a terrifying moment, she feared he could see every secret she'd been hiding behind her carefully constructed facade. "Whiskey," he said, his voice deep and even, "and some information, if you'd be willing." Felicity's hand trembled slightly as she placed a glass before him. "Information about Stockton. I'm afraid I've only been here a few months myself." "That's so." He studied her face for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Funny thing, I've been asking around about a woman who might have come through recently, someone who doesn't quite belong." Ice flooded her veins, but her smile remained fixed. "Stockton sees all kinds passing through. You might want to ask Sheriff Mills if you're looking for someone specific." As she turned to leave, his hand caught her wrist not roughly, but with enough purpose to stop her retreat. "Miss, I don't mean to frighten you," he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "But I recognize a person running when I see one. Your smile doesn't reach your eyes." Felicity pulled her arm away, heart hammering against her ribs. "You're mistaken, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other customers waiting." She hurried away, busying herself with other patrons while stealing glances at the mysterious cowboy. He sipped his whiskey slowly, those unnerving eyes occasionally finding her across the room. When the clock struck 10, he placed coins on the table and departed without another word, leaving Felicity both relieved and unsettled. That night, after the saloon closed, Felicity climbed the narrow staircase to her small rented room above the establishment. She locked the door, sliding a chair beneath the handle, a habit formed from months of looking over her shoulder. Only then did she allow the smile to fall from her face, replaced by the exhaustion and fear she concealed daily. She moved to the wash basin, splashing cool water on her face before staring at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, and her normally rosy complexion had grown pale. 3 months of running had taken its toll, but still, she hadn't gone far enough. They would find her eventually, they always did. From beneath her mattress, Felicity withdrew a folded newspaper clipping dated 2 months prior. The headline read, "Boston heiress still missing, foul play suspected." Below was a sketch that, while not entirely accurate, bore enough resemblance to make recognition possible. She traced a finger over the name in the article Florence Valentine, her real identity, the one she had abandoned along with her former life. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside her door, and Felicity quickly returned the clipping to its hiding place. She stood motionless, hardly daring to breathe until the sound of footsteps faded. Sleep would be elusive tonight, as it often was. Tomorrow she would need to decide whether this Vaughn Ryder posed a genuine threat, or if her fears were making her imagine dangers where none existed. Dawn arrived too quickly, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold visible through her small window. Felicity dressed in her simplest attire, a navy skirt and white blouse, planning to visit the general store before her evening shift at the saloon. She needed sewing supplies to mend a tear in her green dress, and perhaps news had arrived on yesterday's mail coach that might indicate whether she was still being pursued. The main street of Stockton was already bustling with morning activity. Freight wagons rumbled past, merchants opened their storefronts, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakery. Felicity kept her head slightly lowered, acknowledging greetings with quick smiles but never lingering for conversation. 3 months had earned her a place in the community, but she maintained a careful distance, knowing attachment meant vulnerability. As she stepped out of the general store, her purchases tucked into a small paper parcel, a familiar figure leaning against a hitching post across the street caught her attention. Vaughn Ryder, no longer trail dusty but impeccably dressed in a dark coat, watched her with that same penetrating gaze from the previous night. When their eyes met, he straightened and began crossing the street toward her. Panic surged through Felicity's veins. She turned quickly, intending to lose herself in the crowded street, but his voice stopped her. "Miss Vargas, a moment, please." She froze, calculating her options. Running would only confirm his suspicions, whatever they might be. Forcing composure into her expression, she turned to face him. "Mr. Ryder, I'm afraid I'm quite busy this morning." He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair with a slight wave. Up close and in daylight, she noticed the faint scar that ran along his jawline, the only imperfection in his otherwise handsome features. "I owe you an apology for last night," he said, surprising her. "I came on too strong and frightened you. That wasn't my intention." Felicity's practiced smile appeared. "No harm done, sir. As I said, I'm not in a position to provide information about the area. That's not why I'm here." He glanced around before continuing, his voice lower. "I know what it's like to start over somewhere new, carrying things you'd rather leave behind. I recognize the signs because I've lived them." Something in his tone, a genuine understanding, made Felicity study him more carefully. "What exactly do you want, Mr. Ryder? To offer help if you need it. No questions asked." A bitter laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. "Why would a stranger offer help to someone he doesn't know? In my experience, Mr. Ryder, kindness always comes with conditions." His expression remained earnest. "Not always. Sometimes it comes from recognizing a kindred spirit." He reached into his pocket and extended a folded piece of paper. "My ranch is 5 miles north of town. If you ever find yourself needing a safe place, day or night, you'll find the directions here." Hesitantly, Felicity accepted the paper, though she had no intention of using it. "Thank you, but I'm perfectly fine." "Your smile says that," he replied quietly, "but your eyes tell a different story." Before she could respond, shouts erupted from the bank across the street. A man staggered out the door, clutching his chest where blood blossomed across his shirt. 2 masked figures followed, guns drawn as people scattered for cover. "Bank robbery," someone yelled as shots rang out. In the ensuing chaos, Vaughn grabbed Felicity's arm and pulled her into the recessed doorway of the general store, shielding her with his body as bullets splintered wood nearby. She could feel his heartbeat, steady despite the danger, as they pressed against the wall. The robbers mounted waiting horses, firing wildly to cover their escape. As suddenly as it had begun, it was over, leaving a stunned silence broken only by moans from the wounded bank guard and calls for the doctor. "Are you hurt?" Vaughn asked, his face inches from hers, concern evident in his eyes. Felicity shook her head, suddenly aware of their proximity and his hands still holding her shoulders. She stepped away, straightening her disheveled clothing. "I should help with the injured," she said. needing distance from this man who saw too much. For the next hour, Felicity assisted Doc Parker with the wounded guard and a bystander who'd caught a stray bullet. Throughout, she was acutely aware of Vaughn Ryder organizing men to pursue the robbers alongside Sheriff Mills. His capability in crisis was evident in how quickly he took charge, his calm authority inspiring confidence in those around him. By afternoon, Felicity returned to her room to prepare for her evening shift. The bank robbery had shaken the town, and the saloon would likely be filled with people eager to discuss the excitement. As she changed into her green dress, carefully mended along the tier, she found herself repeatedly looking at the folded directions Vaughn had given her. There was something about him that both unnerved and intrigued her. He'd recognized her disguise with disconcerting ease, yet his offer of help seemed genuine. In 3 months of running, no one had bothered to look beyond her smile until him. The saloon was indeed bustling that night, with animated discussions of the robbery dominating every table. Felicity moved among the patrons with her usual efficiency, her smile firmly in place despite the exhaustion weighing on her. They caught one of them, Hank informed her as she collected a tray of empty glasses. Other one got away, but they're tracking him. Sheriff says he might head north toward the mountain passes. Felicity nodded, trying to ignore the chill that ran through her at the thought of armed criminals in the vicinity. She'd faced more dangerous men, after all. Just before midnight, as the crowd began to thin, the saloon doors opened to admit Vaughn Ryder and Sheriff Mills. They looked trail-worn, their expressions grim as they approached the bar. Felicity busied herself with customers at the far end of the room, avoiding Vaughn's gaze until Hank called her over. "Felicity, bring these gentlemen some coffee, would you? They've had a long day chasing those bank robbers." She had no choice but to comply, setting steaming cups before the two men with her usual smile. "Any luck finding the second robber?" she asked, directing the question to Sheriff Mills. "Lost his trail near the crossroads," the older man replied, rubbing his graying mustache. "But we'll find him. Vaughn here tracked him farther than any of my deputies could have." Vaughn sipped his coffee, eyes meeting hers over the rim. "The man's desperate, makes him dangerous." Something in his tone made Felicity look at him more closely. There was a warning there, meant specifically for her. Before she could decipher it, the sheriff continued. "Speaking of which, Miss Vargas, you might want to be extra careful for the next few days. This fellow's still in the area, and he might be looking for a place to hide out or hostages to shield his escape." "I'll be careful, Sheriff," she assured him, already calculating new precautions for her room. When the sheriff excused himself to make rounds, Vaughn remained seated, his long fingers wrapped around the coffee cup. "My offer still stands," he said without preamble. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Ryder, but I can take care of myself," Felicity replied, wiping down the bar with more vigor than necessary. His next words froze her in place. "I'm sure Florence Valentine was quite capable as well." The cloth slipped from her fingers as she stared at him, blood draining from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Vaughn leaned closer, his voice so low only she could hear. "I'm not here to expose you or cause you harm." Quite the opposite. He reached into his vest and withdrew a telegram, sliding it across the bar. "This arrived for me this morning. I have contacts back east who owe me favors. I asked about the Valentine case." With shaking hands, Felicity unfolded the paper and read. "Valentine girl still sought. Stop Harrison claims accident. Stop witnesses disappearing. Stop danger. Real stop. How did you know?" she asked, crumpling the telegram in her fist. "The sketch in the papers doesn't do you justice, but your eyes are unmistakable. And you carry yourself like someone educated, not born to serving drinks." He took the crumpled paper back, tucking it away. "The question is, what really happened in Boston, and why does Theodore Harrison want you silenced?" At the mention of Harrison's name, Felicity felt her careful composure cracking. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away, aware of the remaining patrons who might observe her distress. "Not here," she managed to say. "I finish at 1. Vaughn nodded, understanding. "I'll wait." For the next hour, Felicity moved through her duties mechanically, her mind racing. Vaughn Ryder knew her identity, knew about Harrison, and yet hadn't exposed her. Instead, he'd gone to the trouble of gathering information that confirmed her fears. When the last customer departed and Hank retired upstairs, she found Vaughn still seated at the bar, patient and watchful. She poured 2 whiskeys, sliding one toward him before taking a steadying sip of her own. "Theodore Harrison was my father's business partner," she began, her voice barely audible in the empty saloon. "After my parents died last year, I inherited my father's shipping company. Harrison was named co-executor of the estate until my 25th birthday." Vaughn listened silently as she continued, the words spilling out after months of bearing the burden alone. "I discovered discrepancies in the company ledger's shipments that didn't exist, payments to nameless accounts. When I confronted Harrison, he laughed it off, said I was too young and female to understand business, but I kept investigating." She took another sip of whiskey. "I found evidence he'd been embezzling for years, even while my father was alive. He was also smuggling opium on our ships." "And when you threatened to expose him," Vaughn prompted gently, Felicity's hand trembled around her glass. "There was a fire at my home. My lady's maid died. The newspapers called it an accident, but I saw Harrison's man leaving as the flames spread." Her voice broke. "I fled that night with what little I could carry. I've been moving west ever since, changing my name at every stop, but his men have followed. 2 months ago in Denver, I narrowly escaped when one recognized me." Vaughn covered her hand with his, warm and steady. "And now you're in Stockton, still running, still afraid." "Always afraid," she admitted, the words releasing something tight within her chest. "Harrison wants me dead because I'm the only one who can testify to his crimes. With me gone, everything belongs to him." "You kept evidence," she nodded. "Hidden where he'll never find it, but it does me no good unless I can return to Boston with enough protection to use it." Vaughn was quiet for a moment, contemplating. "The second bank robber," he finally said. "We didn't lose his trail by accident. I recognized him as we were tracking Timothy Walsh, one of Harrison's hired men. I've had dealings with Harrison's organization in the past, though not directly with the man himself." Fear clutched at Felicity's heart. "He's found me again. It seems so. Walsh may not know you're here yet, might be coincidence that brought him to Stockton, but we can't take that chance." Vaughn stood, decision made. "Pack your things. You're coming to my ranch tonight." "I can't just leave," she protested weakly. "Hank depends on me and running again." "This isn't running," Vaughn interrupted gently. "It's strategic retreat. My ranch is defensible, isolated, and Walsh doesn't know about our connection. You'll be safer there while we figure out our next move." "Our next move," Felicity repeated, caught by the implication of partnership. Vaughn's expression softened slightly. "I told you I recognize what you're carrying because I've carried similar burdens. 5 years ago, I was an investigator for the Pinkerton Agency. I uncovered corruption that went high into government circles. When I pushed too hard, people I cared about paid the price." His jaw tightened. "I came west to start over, but some ghosts follow no matter how far you run," understanding dawned in Felicity's eyes. "That's why you noticed me, why you knew what to look for," he nodded. "And why I know you can't keep running forever. At some point you have to turn and face what's chasing you." For the first time in months, Felicity felt something other than fear, a tentative hope, fragile but real. "Give me 10 minutes to pack." True to her word, Felicity returned downstairs with her carpet bag containing everything she owned in the world. She'd left a note for Hank explaining a family emergency required her immediate departure, with apologies for the abruptness. It wasn't entirely a lie. Survival had indeed become her most pressing family business. Outside, Vaughn waited with 2 horses, his own magnificent black stallion and a smaller chestnut mare. "Can you ride?" he asked, taking her bag. "I grew up riding in Boston's countryside," she confirmed, gathering her skirts to mount with practiced ease despite her weariness. They traveled in silence through the sleeping town, keeping to side streets until reaching the northern road. The moon, nearly full, illuminated their path across the rolling California landscape. Felicity found herself studying Vaughn's profile as he rode beside her, the strong line of his jaw, the vigilant eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. He was a man accustomed to watching for danger, yet there was a gentleness in how he'd handled her revelations. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked as they crossed a shallow creek, the water glimmering silver in the moonlight. "You don't know me. I could be lying about everything." Vaughn glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "You could be, but you're not. I've interrogated enough people to recognize truth when I hear it." He adjusted his hat before continuing. "As for why, let's just say I understand what it's like to stand alone against powerful men who think themselves above the law. No one helped me when I needed it most. Perhaps this is my way of balancing those scales." They crested a hill, and below them spread a modest ranch nestled in a protected valley. A main house constructed of sturdy logs stood central to several outbuildings, with corrals and a small stable nearby. A stream curved around the property, and beyond, cattle grazed on the moonlit pasture. "Ryder Ranch," Vaughn announced without pride but with evident satisfaction. "Not the largest spread in California, but it's mine, built with honest work. The foreman's cabin is empty. You can stay there for privacy. My housekeeper, Mrs. Weaver, comes by days, but she's trustworthy." As they approached, a dog's bark alerted someone inside the main house. A moment later, a lantern gleamed, and a middle-aged man with a shotgun appeared on the porch. "It's me, Daniel," Vaughn called out. "All's well." The man lowered his weapon, visibly relaxing. "Didn't expect you back tonight, boss. Everything all right in town? We have a guest who'll be staying in the foreman's cabin for a while," Vaughn explained as they dismounted. "Miss Vargas needs some peace and quiet. We'll explain more tomorrow." Daniel nodded, accepting the explanation without question as he took the horse's reins. "I'll see to the animals. Cabin's clean. Mrs. Weaver aired it out just yesterday." The foreman's cabin was small but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy bed with fresh linens, a table with 2 chairs, and a small cooking area. Vaughn lit lamps and started a fire to ward off the night chill while Felicity stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sudden change in circumstances. "It's not what you're used to in Boston," he said, misinterpreting her silence. "No," she agreed softly. "It's better. I haven't felt safe enough to truly sleep in months." Something passed across his face, understanding mixed with another emotion she couldn't quite name. "Rest now," he said, moving toward the door. "We'll talk more in the morning." As he passed her, Felicity impulsively caught his arm. "Thank you, Vaughn, for seeing what no one else bothered to see." Their eyes met in the lamplight, and for a moment neither moved. Then he gently covered her hand with his. "You're safe now, Felicity. I promise you that." After he left, Felicity stood motionless in the cabin's center, his words echoing in her mind. "You're safe now." How long had she longed to hear those words and believe them? For the first time since fleeing Boston, she allowed herself to release the vigilance that had become her constant companion. As exhaustion claimed her, she sank onto the bed fully clothed, surrendering to the deepest sleep she had known in months. Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin's east-facing window when Felicity finally stirred. For a disorienting moment, she didn't recognize her surroundings, panic rising until memories of the previous night returned. Ryder Ranch, safety at least temporary. A soft knock at the door brought her fully awake. She quickly smoothed her rumpled clothing and hair before opening it to find a plump, gray-haired woman bearing a tray laden with breakfast foods. "Good morning, dear. I'm Mrs. Weaver. Mr. Ryder asked me to bring you something to eat. Said you had a trying journey yesterday." The woman's kind eyes showed curiosity, but no judgment as she placed the tray on the table. "There's fresh clothing in the trunk at the foot of the bed. Might be a bit large, but clean. Belonged to Mr. Ryder's sister when she visited last summer." Felicity thanked her, surprised by Vaughn's thoughtfulness. After Mrs. Weaver departed, she discovered the trunk did indeed contain several practical dresses, undergarments, and even a pair of riding boots. The blue calico dress fit reasonably well with minor adjustments, and the simple cotton undergarments were a welcome change from her travel-worn ones. After a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread with preserves, Felicity felt renewed enough to venture outside. The ranch appeared even more appealing by daylight, nestled protectively among rolling hills, with the Sierra Nevada mountains visible in the distance. Several ranch hands were visible in the corrals, breaking horses or mending fences. The air carried the scents of pine, earth, and livestock altogether different from Boston's city odors or even Stockton's dusty streets. She found Vaughn by the barn, deep in conversation with Daniel. Both men straightened as she approached, and Vaughn's expression shifted subtly, appreciation briefly replacing his businesslike demeanor. "You look rested," he observed. "The clothes fit well enough. Yes, thank you for your thoughtfulness." She glanced between them. "I'm interrupting your work." "Not at all," Daniel assured her before excusing himself with a respectful nod. Vaughn gestured toward the main house. "Mrs. Weaver's prepared coffee on the porch. If you join me, we should discuss our situation." The porch wrapped around the substantial log house, offering views of the entire valley. Comfortable chairs surrounded a small table bearing a coffee pot and cups. As they settled, Felicity noted the strategic positioning. They could see anyone approaching long before being seen themselves. "I rode into town at dawn," Vaughn began, pouring coffee for them both. "Walsh was captured overnight trying to steal a horse. He's in Sheriff Mills jail, but he won't talk." Felicity's hands tightened around her cup. "Does he know about me?" "I don't believe so." "He seemed genuinely surprised when Mills mentioned my involvement in tracking him. If he knew you were connected to me, there would have been some reaction." Vaughn leaned back, thoughtful. "But that doesn't mean Harrison's other men won't come looking. We need to consider our options carefully." "Options?" Felicity shook her head sadly. "I've been considering options for months. I can't return to Boston without protection, but no one will stand against Harrison's influence without the evidence, which I can't access without returning. It's an impossible situation." Vaughn studied her for a long moment. "What if we could break the cycle? Bring the evidence to you instead of you going to it?" Hope flickered briefly in Felicity's eyes before doubt extinguished it. "The documents are hidden in a safe deposit box at the Commonwealth Bank in Boston. Only I can access it, and Harrison watches that bank constantly." "Not you personally," Vaughn clarified. "Someone acting on your behalf with proper legal authorization." Understanding dawned. "You mean a lawyer with power of attorney, but who would I trust with that? And how would they avoid Harrison's men?" A slight smile touched Vaughn's lips. "I still have connections from my Pinkerton days, people who owe me favors and have the skills to move undetected. And there's a lawyer in Sacramento who helped me establish this ranch, a man of absolute integrity." For the first time, Felicity allowed herself to truly consider the possibility of fighting back rather than simply surviving. Even with the evidence, Harrison has powerful friends. The local authorities in Boston were unwilling to act when I first discovered his crimes. "Then we take it higher," Vaughn countered. "Federal marshals have jurisdiction over interstate crimes. Smuggling opium on ships engaging in interstate and international commerce falls squarely within their purview." The strategic thinking reminded Felicity that this man had once hunted criminals professionally. His mind worked differently than hers, seeing pathways where she saw only walls. It would take time to arrange all this, she noted, practical despite her growing hope. "Yes," he agreed. "A month, perhaps two, during which you'd need to remain here out of sight." Felicity gazed across the peaceful valley, weighing his proposal. "Why would you do all this for me? The risk to yourself is one I'm choosing to accept," Vaughn interrupted gently. "Theodore Harrison represents everything I fought against as an investigator, men who believe wealth places them above consequences. The chance to help bring such a man to justice is reason enough." There was more he wasn't saying. She could see it in the way his eyes lingered on her face, but she didn't press. Instead, she simply nodded. "Then I accept your help, and I thank you for it." Their planning session extended through the morning as Vaughn outlined his strategy. By noon, they had drafted letters to his contacts and discussed security arrangements for the ranch. Felicity found herself impressed by his thoroughness and the quiet confidence with which he addressed every contingency. Over the coming days, a routine developed at Ryder Ranch. Felicity, accustomed to activity, refused to remain idle. She helped Mrs. Weaver with household tasks during the mornings, learned the basics of ranch management from Daniel in the afternoons, and spent evenings on the porch with Vaughn, discussing their progress or simply enjoying comfortable silences as the sun set behind the mountains. A week into her stay, Vaughn suggested she might enjoy riding the property boundaries. Felicity eagerly accepted, donning the riding clothes Mrs. Weaver had altered to fit her smaller frame. The chestnut mare she'd ridden from town named Penny, she'd learned responded beautifully to her commands as they cantered alongside Vaughn's stallion through flowering meadows and shaded forest trails. "You ride well," he commented, as they paused atop a ridge overlooking the entire valley. "Your Boston upbringing shows." Felicity smiled, genuine pleasure replacing her habitual mask. "My father insisted I learn properly, not side-saddle like other young ladies. He believed women should know how to do things for themselves." Her expression softened with memory. "He would have approved of how I've managed these past months, I think surviving on my own." "He'd be proud," Vaughn agreed, "but perhaps concerned you've had to face it alone." She glanced at him, noting how the sunlight caught the subtle auburn highlights in his dark hair. "I'm not entirely alone anymore, am I?" Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that had been growing between them these past days. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." As April turned to May, Stockton buzzed with news that the captured bank robber had escaped during a prisoner transfer. Vaughn doubled the ranch's security measures, but Felicity refused to retreat into fear, continuing her daily activities with cautious vigilance rather than paralyzing dread. Their letters received responses. Vaughn's lawyer friend in Sacramento agreed to prepare the necessary documents, and his former Pinkerton colleague would travel to Boston once they were ready. The plan was taking shape, transforming from possibility to probability with each passing day. And something else was transforming too: the relationship between Felicity and Vaughn. It began with small things: lingering glances across the dinner table, hands brushing as they reached for the same book, conversations that stretched late into the night as they discovered shared interests in literature and philosophy. Felicity found herself noticing details about him: the way his brow furrowed when concentrating on ranch ledgers, how his rare, full smile transformed his serious face, the gentleness in his hands when treating an injured foal. One evening in late May, they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. A comfortable silence had settled between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and chirping crickets. "I received another telegram today," Vaughn said eventually, "from my contact in Boston." Felicity turned to him, instantly alert. "What news?" "Harrison knows you're alive. He's offering a substantial reward for information on your whereabouts." He hesitated before continuing. "There's something else. The medical examiner who ruled your maid's death accidental was found dead himself last week. Robbery gone wrong according to the newspapers." Cold anger replaced Felicity's initial fear. "He's eliminating witnesses, making sure no one can corroborate my story even if I do return." Her hands clenched in her lap. "More blood on his hands because of me." "Not because of you," Vaughn corrected firmly. "Because of his own crimes. You bear no responsibility for his actions." She rose abruptly, pacing the porch. "How many more will die while we wait? Every day that passes puts others at risk." Vaughn stood as well, catching her hands to still her movement. "Rushing now would only endanger our chances of stopping him permanently. We're close, Felicity." "The power of attorney documents arrive tomorrow, and my contact leaves for Boston next week." His touch anchored her, warm and reassuring. Looking up, she found his face closer than expected, his expression intense in the fading light. Something unspoken passed between them, the acknowledgement of feelings that had been building steadily since that first night in Stockton. "I find myself dreading the day this is over," he admitted softly, "when you'll no longer have reason to remain here." Felicity's breath caught. "Who says I'd want to leave?" The question hung between them, laden with implications neither had voiced until now. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, Vaughn raised a hand to her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. "I've known many brave people in my life," he murmured, "but none with your particular courage, smiling through fear, standing tall when everything was taken from you." "Not everything," she whispered. I found something unexpected here, something I wasn't looking for. When his lips finally met hers, it felt like the natural conclusion to a conversation their hearts had been having for weeks. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning, then deepened as her arms wrapped around his neck, drawing him closer. For the first time in months, Felicity felt truly present in the moment, not hiding, not running, simply being. They broke apart at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Vaughn immediately pushed Felicity behind him, hand moving to the revolver at his hip as Daniel galloped into the yard. "Ryder's coming," the foreman announced breathlessly. 5 men, heavily armed, asking about the ranch at Miller's store. "Tom rode out to warn us." Vaughn's expression hardened. "Harrison's men, likely." Tom said one matched the description of the escaped bank robber. Turning to Felicity, Vaughn spoke with quiet urgency. "The cellar beneath the kitchen has a hidden room used by the previous owner during Indian raids. Mrs. Weaver will show you." "I won't hide while you face danger because of me," she protested. "This isn't open for debate." His voice softened slightly at her expression. "Please, Felicity, I need to know you're safe to focus on defending the ranch." Something in his tone, not commanding but pleading, convinced her. With a quick nod, she hurried toward the house where Mrs. Weaver waited anxiously. The cellar room was small but well provisioned with water, blankets, and even a loaded shotgun. As Mrs. Weaver sealed the hidden entrance, disguising it behind shelves of preserved foods, Felicity heard the older woman praying softly. Above them, boots thudded across the kitchen floor as Vaughn's men took defensive positions throughout the house. Time passed with excruciating slowness in the darkness. Occasional muffled voices filtered through the thick walls, but Felicity couldn't distinguish words or speakers. When distant gunshots finally shattered the silence, she gripped the shotgun tighter, every muscle tense with the effort of remaining hidden when every instinct screamed to act. More shots followed, then shouting, then an eerie quiet that proved more terrifying than the gunfire. Beside her, Mrs. Weaver's breathing had grown rapid with fear. Felicity reached out, squeezing the woman's hand reassuringly despite her own dread. "It's been too long," she whispered eventually. "Something's wrong." Before Mrs. Weaver could respond, heavy footsteps approached the cellar door. Both women froze as someone descended the stairs, moving directly to the false wall concealing their hiding place. "Felicity?" Vaughn's voice, strained but unmistakable. "It's over. You can come out now." Relief flooded through her as Mrs. Weaver activated the mechanism revealing the hidden door. Vaughn stood in the cellar, a bloodied bandage wrapped around his left arm but otherwise intact. Without thinking, Felicity launched herself into his arms, nearly causing him to stumble. "Easy," he chuckled despite his obvious exhaustion. "I'm all right. What happened?" She demanded, examining his injury with concern. "Walsh and his men thought they'd catch us unprepared. They were wrong." His expression darkened. "2 of them won't be reporting back to Harrison. The others fled, but Sheriff Mills and his deputies are in pursuit." That night, after the sheriff had taken statements and departed with promises of increased patrols, Felicity insisted on properly cleaning and bandaging Vaughn's wound. They sat at the kitchen table, the house quiet now that the ranch hands had returned to their bunkhouse, and Mrs. Weaver to her cottage. "It could have been much worse," she said quietly, securing the fresh bandage around his arm. "You could have been killed because of me." Vaughn captured her hand as she finished. "Or because of my own choice to stand against men like Harrison." "Stop claiming responsibility that isn't yours." His directness startled a smile from her. "You're very stubborn, Mr. Ryder, a quality we seem to share, Miss Valentine." His use of her real surname was deliberate, reminding her of who she truly was beneath the necessary disguises. She met his gaze steadily. "When this is over, when Harrison faces justice, I'll need to return to Boston at least temporarily to reclaim my name and my father's company." "I know," he acknowledged, something like resignation in his tone. Felicity continued, her voice gaining strength. "But Boston isn't home anymore. It hasn't been since the fire." She took a deep breath. "This place being here with you feels more like home than anywhere has in a very long time." Hope replaced resignation in his expression. "Are you saying that I'd like to return if I'd be welcome?" Her cheeks flushed slightly. not as someone hiding or running, but as myself, as Florence Valentine who chooses to be Felicity Vargas because she prefers the life she's found here. Vaughn stood, drawing her up with him. "You would always be welcome," he said, his voice low and fervent. "But I should warn you, if you return, I may not let you leave again." "Is that a threat, Mr. Ryder?" she teased, though her heart raced at the intensity in his eyes. "A promise," he corrected before capturing her lips in a kiss that spoke of possibility and futures yet to be written. The following weeks brought progress and setbacks in equal measure. The power of attorney documents arrived as promised, and Vaughn's Pinkerton contact, a shrewd, silver-haired man named Ellis, departed for Boston with instructions to recover the evidence and deliver it directly to the federal marshal's office in Sacramento. Meanwhile, life at the ranch continued. Felicity found herself increasingly involved in its operations, applying her business acumen to the ranch ledgers with Vaughn's grateful approval. They established a routine that felt domestic and natural, taking meals together, working side by side during the day, and spending evenings in conversation or comfortable silence. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. Vaughn shared stories of his Pinkerton years, the cases he'd solved, the corruption he'd uncovered, and eventually, the tragedy that had driven him west. A senator's son had been implicated in Vaughn's investigation, and in retaliation, the powerful family had orchestrated a campaign to discredit him professionally while arranging an accident that claimed his younger brother's life. "I couldn't prove their involvement," he explained one night as they sat before the fire. "But I knew, just as I knew continuing the fight would only endanger more people I cared about." Felicity understood completely. "So you chose to start over somewhere new." "I chose to wait," he corrected. "For the right time, the right opportunity to seek justice. I haven't abandoned that fight, merely postponed it." She studied his face in the firelight, recognizing the same determination that drove her own quest for justice. "We're more alike than I realized that first night in Stockton." His smile held a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Perhaps that's why I recognized what you were hiding behind that smile. I've worn similar masks myself." June brought scorching temperatures to the California Valley. Work slowed during the hottest midday hours, and evenings were spent on the porch with cold lemonade as the ranch hands played music in the distance. Despite the peaceful routine, tension remained. Walsh and his surviving men had disappeared, and Harrison's reach was long. They maintained vigilance even as they waited for news from Boston. It arrived unexpectedly one sweltering afternoon when a rider from town delivered an urgent telegram. Vaughn read it on the porch, his expression unreadable before handing it to Felicity. "Documents secured. Stop evidence compelling. Stop federal marshals involved. Stop Harrison fled Boston. Stop believed heading west. Stop extreme caution advised. Stop Ellis, he's coming here," Felicity whispered, the paper trembling in her hands. "Somehow he knows." Vaughn nodded grimly. "Walsh must have gotten word to him before disappearing. But there's good news too. The evidence is safe, and federal authorities are involved now. Harrison is running because he knows he's finished in Boston, which makes him more dangerous than ever," she countered. "He has nothing to lose." That evening, they developed a new strategy. Felicity would relocate temporarily to Sacramento under the protection of Vaughn's lawyer friend, while Vaughn remained at the ranch, creating the illusion that she was still there. Federal marshals had been alerted and were watching major transportation routes, but Harrison's wealth could buy him unmonitored passage. "I don't like leaving you to face him," Felicity argued as they prepared for her departure the following morning. Vaughn pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You'll be taking the greater risk traveling to Sacramento. Once you're safely there, I can focus on ensuring Harrison meets justice rather than escape." She looked up at him, memorizing his features in the lamplight. "Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. Harrison isn't worth your life." "I promise," he said solemnly. "I have too much to live for now." Dawn had barely broken when Felicity departed with Daniel as escort, traveling back roads towards Sacramento in a nondescript wagon rather than on horseback. They had gone no more than 10 miles when Daniel suddenly reined the horses to a stop, his experienced eye catching movement in the tree line ahead. "Back to the ranch," he ordered tersely. "We're being watched." They turned the wagon with practiced efficiency, but not quickly enough. Riders emerged from the trees, cutting off their retreat. Felicity recognized Walsh among them, his face twisted in a triumphant sneer. "Well, well," he called. "Miss Valentine herself, trying to slip away. Mr. Harrison will be mighty pleased we caught you before you reached Sacramento." Daniel reached slowly for his rifle, but Walsh's revolver appeared first. "Don't try it, old man. We only need the girl alive." Felicity's mind raced. If they were here watching the road, then Harrison must be the ranch, she gasped. "Vaughn's alone there." Walsh's smirk confirmed her fears. "Mr. Harrison wanted a private conversation with the man who's been harboring you. Now, you'll come quietly, or we'll make sure your escort doesn't see another sunrise." With no choice that wouldn't endanger Daniel, Felicity allowed herself to be transferred to Walsh's horse. As they rode away, she heard Daniel shouting that he would get help. She prayed he would reach Stockton in time to alert the sheriff, but her heart knew Vaughn faced immediate danger. They rode hard through forest trails, avoiding the main road, before emerging at the ranch from an unexpected direction. The property appeared peaceful in the morning light, too peaceful. No ranch hands moved about the yard, no smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney. Walsh led her to the main house, where two armed men stood guard at the door. Inside, the usual warmth of Vaughn's home had been replaced by an atmosphere of menace. Furniture was overturned, and blood stained the wooden floor, signs of struggle that made Felicity's heart constrict painfully. In the main sitting room, a well-dressed man with silver-streaked dark hair sat comfortably in Vaughn's favorite chair. Theodore Harrison looked precisely as Felicity remembered, handsome in a cold way, with calculating eyes that had once fooled Boston society into believing him a gentleman. Beside him stood another guard, and at his feet Vaughn. Felicity lurched forward at the sight of him kneeling on the floor, hands bound behind his back, face bloodied but conscious. A guard restrained her immediately. Harrison smiled pleasantly, as though welcoming her to a social gathering rather than a nightmare. "Florence, my dear, how disappointing to find you living in such rustic circumstances after your privileged upbringing." "What have you done to him?" she demanded, ignoring the false pleasantries. "Nothing permanent yet." Harrison stood, smoothing his expensive vest. "Mr. Ryder and I were discussing his unfortunate interference in our private business matters. He's been quite stubborn about revealing your plans." Vaughn's eyes met hers, conveying silent warning. Despite his injuries, his gaze remained defiant, giving her strength. "It's over, Harrison," she said, drawing herself up with the dignity her father had instilled in her. "The evidence has already reached federal authorities. Your accounts are frozen, your ships impounded. Running west won't save you." Uncertainty flickered briefly across Harrison's composed features before his smile returned. "Evidence can disappear. Officials can be bribed. But you, my dear, are the only witness who can testify to conversations we had. Without you, it becomes speculation and hearsay. You won't escape justice this time," Vaughn spoke, his voice rough but steady. "Too many people know the truth now." Harrison's response was to casually retrieve a revolver from his coat. People can forget quite easily when properly motivated. "Or they can have unfortunate accidents like your brother did, Mr. Ryder." Shock registered on Vaughn's face. "You knew Senator Williams." "We've had business dealings," Harrison admitted with a shrug. "When he mentioned a troublesome Pinkerton agent who'd been neutralized through family tragedy, I never imagined I'd encounter the man himself in California." He aimed the revolver at Vaughn's head. "Life has such interesting symmetry sometimes." "No." Felicity moved forward despite the guard's restraining hand. "Kill him, and you'll never find what you really want." Harrison paused, curiosity overcoming his immediate desire for retribution. "And what might that be?" "My father's real ledgers," she improvised desperately. "The ones that detail every transaction you both made for 20 years. The evidence in Boston is only part of what I took when I fled." It was a lie, but one Harrison couldn't afford to dismiss. His eyes narrowed. "Where are these supposed ledgers?" "Somewhere you'll never find them without my cooperation." Felicity met his gaze steadily. Kill either of us, and they go directly to every newspaper in the country upon my death. I've arranged it." Harrison studied her, searching for deception. Whatever he saw made him lower the revolver slightly. "You've become quite the strategist, Florence. Your father would be impressed. He never had the spine for such maneuvers." "Release him," she demanded, nodding toward Vaughn. "Let him leave unharmed, and I'll take you to the ledgers." "Felicity, don't," Vaughn protested, struggling against his bonds. "He'll kill you once he has what he wants." Harrison laughed, genuinely amused. "He knows me well for such brief acquaintance." He considered the offer, calculating risks and benefits with the same cold precision he applied to business dealings. Counter-proposal. "Mr. Ryder remains here under guard while you and I retrieve these ledgers. His continued good health depends entirely on your cooperation." It wasn't ideal, but it bought time for Daniel to reach the sheriff, time for the federal marshals potentially en route from Sacramento. Felicity nodded her agreement. "A wise choice," Harrison approved. "We'll depart immediately. Walsh, you and Parker stay with our friend. If we're not back by sundown, or if anyone approaches the property, kill him." As they prepared to leave, Felicity was permitted a brief moment near Vaughn. Kneeling beside him under Harrison's watchful eye, she whispered, "Trust me," while her fingers secretly worked to loosen the rope binding his wrists. "Always," he murmured, his eyes conveying everything words couldn't in that moment. Harrison led Felicity outside where horses waited. "Where are we going, my dear?" "The abandoned mining camp near the North Ridge," she answered without hesitation, having explored the area extensively during her rides with Vaughn. "I hid the ledgers in an old shaft." They rode with two of Harrison's men flanking them, following Felicity's directions into increasingly rugged terrain. She deliberately chose the longest route, crossing streams unnecessarily to waste time while appearing to avoid populated areas. "I must admit, Florence, you've shown remarkable resilience," Harrison commented as they climbed a steep trail. "Most society ladies would have crumbled under similar circumstances." "I stopped being a society lady the night you murdered Jane," she replied coldly, referring to her lady's maid. "That night, I became whatever I needed to be to see you pay for your crimes." Harrison's pleasant mask slipped momentarily. "Business sometimes requires difficult decisions. Your father understood that. It's why our partnership prospered. You could have been part of that legacy instead of becoming its destruction." "My father trusted you," Felicity countered, anger giving her courage. "He believed you were his friend while you stole from him and used his ships for smuggling. He would have seen you imprisoned himself had he discovered your betrayal." Their conversation was interrupted as they reached an overlook, revealing a small, decrepit mining camp nestled in a ravine below. Several collapsed wooden structures surrounded the black mouth of a mine shaft, exactly as Felicity had described and exactly where she had once explored with Vaughn during a day-long ride. "There," she pointed. "The ledgers are hidden in a lockbox inside the main tunnel." As they descended toward the abandoned camp, Felicity's mind worked frantically. She needed to separate Harrison from his men somehow, create confusion, buy more time. The old mining camp offered possibilities: unstable structures, narrow passages, places where a smaller person might move more quickly than pursuers. Upon reaching the camp, Harrison ordered one man to remain with the horses while he and the other guard followed Felicity toward the mine entrance. The timbers supporting the shaft looked rotted and dangerous, a fact she counted on as she led them inside. "It's about 50 yards in where the tunnel branches," she explained, moving confidently into the darkness. "We'll need the lantern." The guard lit the lamp he'd brought, illuminating a narrow passage that sloped downward into the earth. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the air grew cool and damp as they progressed deeper. Harrison remained suspiciously close behind Felicity, his revolver occasionally pressing against her back as a reminder. When they reached a fork in the tunnel, Felicity hesitated convincingly. "It's in the right passage, behind a loose section of wall." The guard moved ahead with the lantern, examining the rough stone walls. While his attention was diverted, Felicity's hand found a loose support beam she'd noted on her previous visit. One strong pull, and the tunnel filled with noise and dust as sections of the ceiling collapsed. The guard cried out as falling debris struck him, dropping the lantern which shattered against the ground, plunging them into darkness. Felicity, having anticipated the collapse, had already pressed herself against the left passage wall, avoiding the worst of the cave-in. In the confusion and darkness, she slipped into the left tunnel, moving as quickly as she dared by feel along the rough wall. Behind her, she heard Harrison cursing and the injured guard moaning. The collapse hadn't been massive, just enough to create chaos and darkness. Florence. Harrison's voice echoed with fury. "This changes nothing. I'll find you and then your rancher dies." Felicity didn't respond, conserving her breath as she hurried deeper into the mine. She knew from exploring with Vaughn that this left passage eventually connected to a smaller exit, half hidden by brush, if she could reach it, before Harrison recovered and organized pursuit. Daylight appeared ahead, a blessed relief after the suffocating darkness. She emerged into sunshine, quickly orienting herself before racing toward the horses left under guard. The lone man stood at attention as she approached, clearly not expecting her to appear from a different direction than the main entrance. "Mr. Harrison needs help," she called breathlessly. "There's been a cave-in." The guard hesitated only briefly before rushing toward the mine, leaving the horses unattended. Felicity wasted no time mounting Harrison's own horse, the finest of the group, and spurring it toward Ryder Ranch as fast as the animal could gallop. The ride back seemed endless despite the horse's speed. Every moment that passed meant Vaughn remained in danger, with Walsh's instructions to kill him if Harrison didn't return by sundown. The afternoon sun was already lowering toward the western mountains as she finally approached familiar territory. Rather than ride directly to the house, Felicity circled to approach from the rear where the terrain offered cover. Dismounting in a grove of trees, she crept toward the kitchen garden, staying low among the plants as she observed the house. Two men, Walsh and another, stood on the porch, rifles ready but postures relaxed. They couldn't see her from their position, but neither could she determine where Vaughn was being held inside. She needed a distraction, something to draw at least one guard away. The solution came in an unexpected form as Daniel suddenly appeared at the edge of her vision, gesturing urgently from the cover of the stable. Relief flooded through her as she carefully made her way to him. "Sheriff's coming with deputies," he whispered once she reached him. "But they're still 20 minutes behind me." I doubled back through the creek to avoid Harrison's men watching the road. "Vaughn's inside with 2 guards," she explained rapidly. "Harrison and the others won't be far behind me. There was a cave-in at the old mine, but it won't hold them long." Daniel's weathered face showed grim determination. "We need to get the boss out before they return. I've got an idea, but it's risky." The plan was simple but effective. Daniel would create a distraction at the bunkhouse far enough from the main house to draw at least one guard to investigate, but close enough to be concerning. Meanwhile, Felicity would enter through the kitchen's root cellar, which connected to the house through a trapdoor in the pantry floor. "Be careful," Daniel warned as they prepared to separate. "These men aren't just thieves, they're killers." "So am I when necessary," Felicity replied with quiet resolve. "Harrison made me that way when he took everything from me." Daniel nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "Signal when you're in position." Moments later, smoke began rising from behind the bunkhouse, followed by the sound of breaking glass. As predicted, Walsh ordered his companion to investigate while he remained on the porch, rifle trained toward the disturbance. Felicity slipped to the root cellar doors at the side of the house, finding them unlocked as Daniel had promised. The earthy darkness enveloped her as she descended the steps and felt her way to the interior ladder leading to the pantry above. Silently, she pushed against the trapdoor, lifting it just enough to peek through. The kitchen appeared empty, though voices were audible from the main room. One was Walsh's, calling questions to his partner outside. The other, responding with groans rather than words, was unmistakably Vaughn's. Gathering her courage, Felicity eased the trapdoor open and climbed into the pantry. Through the partially open kitchen door, she could see into the main room where Vaughn sat bound to a chair, his face more bloodied than before. Walsh paced nervously, dividing his attention between his prisoner and the window overlooking the bunkhouse where smoke now billowed convincingly. Her eyes searched the kitchen for a weapon, landing on a heavy cast iron skillet hanging beside the stove. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Taking a deep breath, she grasped the implement and moved silently toward the doorway. Walsh had his back to her, rifle balanced in the crook of his arm as he peered out the window. Vaughn, facing the kitchen, saw her first. His eyes widened slightly before he deliberately looked away, engaging Walsh in conversation to maintain his attention. "Your boss isn't coming back," Vaughn said, voice strained but steady. "The lady's smarter than all of you combined." "Shut up," Walsh snapped, turning partially toward his prisoner. Harrison willed the skillet connected with the back of Walsh's head with all the force Felicity could muster. He crumpled instantly, the rifle clattering to the floor beside him. She kicked the weapon away before rushing to Vaughn. "Are you badly hurt?" she asked, frantically working to untie his bonds. "I've had worse," he managed, though blood streaked his face from a cut above his eye and his left arm hung awkwardly, suggesting a dislocated shoulder. "Harrison? Delayed by a convenient cave-in, but he'll be here soon." The ropes finally gave way, and Vaughn nearly fell forward as his arms were freed. Felicity supported him as best she could. "Daniel's outside. Sheriff's coming." Walsh groaned on the floor, beginning to stir. Without hesitation, Vaughn grabbed the fallen rifle and struck him with its butt, ensuring he remained unconscious. "We need to move," he said, grimacing as he tried to stand. "The other guard will return any moment." Supporting each other, they made their way toward the kitchen and the root cellar beyond. They had almost reached the pantry when the front door burst open, revealing Harrison's second guard, rifle raised. "Stop right there," he commanded, finger tightening on the trigger. A shot rang out, but not from the guard's weapon. He looked down in confusion at the spreading red stain on his chest before collapsing forward, revealing Daniel in the doorway, revolver still smoking. "Sheriff's just coming up the valley road," the foreman reported tersely. "But we've got company approaching fast from the north ridge." Through the window, they could see dust clouds indicating riders approaching at speed. Harrison returning with his remaining men, no doubt enraged and determined for revenge. "Get to the cellar," Vaughn ordered, his strength seemingly returning with the immediate danger. "Daniel, take positions with the ranch hands. Don't let them reach the house." Felicity helped him to the gun cabinet, where he retrieved his own revolver and a shotgun before they descended to the root cellar and out into the yard. Gunfire erupted from the direction of the bunkhouse as Harrison's approaching riders exchanged shots with Daniel and the ranch hands who had taken defensive positions. "The sheriff won't reach us in time," Vaughn noted grimly as they sought cover behind the stone well. "Harrison will burn the place down around us if he can't get what he wants." Felicity watched the approaching riders, 4 men including Harrison, closing fast despite the resistance. "Then we make our stand here," she said, accepting the revolver Vaughn pressed into her hands. "Together." He looked at her with an expression that contained both pride and something deeper, something that made her heart race despite the danger surrounding them. "Together," he agreed, "but Felicity, if we survive this." "When we survive this," she corrected firmly. A smile touched his bloodied lips. "When we survive this, there's something I need to ask you." Before she could respond, Harrison's voice carried across the yard. "Florence, come out now or we'll kill everyone on this miserable ranch." Vaughn's hand covered hers. "Don't even think about surrendering. That's not how this ends." "I know," she assured him. "That's not who I am anymore." The standoff lasted mere minutes, but felt like hours. Harrison and his men attempting to advance toward the house while Vaughn, Felicity, and the ranch hands held them at bay with carefully placed shots. When Sheriff Mills and his deputies finally appeared on the southern road, Harrison's men broke formation, attempting to flee northward. In the chaos, Harrison himself made a desperate charge toward Felicity and Vaughn's position, firing wildly as he approached on horseback. Vaughn pushed Felicity down, shielding her with his body as bullets splintered the wood beside them. When Harrison's revolver clicked empty, Vaughn rose up, shotgun leveled. "It's over, Harrison," he called. "Throw down your weapons." Instead, Harrison produced a second revolver from his coat, aiming directly at Vaughn with murderous intent. Two shots rang out simultaneously, one from Harrison's weapon, one from Felicity's revolver as she stepped out from behind Vaughn. Harrison's bullet whistled harmlessly past them. Felicity's found its mark. Theodore Harrison looked genuinely surprised as he toppled from his horse, the revolver falling from suddenly lifeless fingers. He lay motionless in the dust of the ranch yard he had sought to conquer, brought down by the woman whose spirit he had failed to break. In the aftermath, with Harrison dead and his remaining men captured by the sheriff, Vaughn and Felicity sat side by side on the porch steps while Doc Parker tended their injuries. The ranch had survived with minimal damage, some broken windows, bullet holes in the bunkhouse, trampled garden plants, all reparable with time and work. Federal marshals just arrived in Stockton, Sheriff Mills informed them as he approached from speaking with his deputies. They've been tracking Harrison since he fled Boston, got all the evidence they need to dismantle his operation completely. And the charges against Miss Valentine, Vaughn asked, his hand finding Felicity's despite his bandaged arm. Cleared completely, the sheriff confirmed. The marshals have witness statements confirming Harrison's responsibility for the Boston fire and subsequent deaths. They'll need her testimony eventually, but there's no rush now. When they were finally alone that evening, exhausted but healing, Vaughn led Felicity to the porch swing that had become their favorite spot for watching sunsets. The western sky blazed orange and gold, casting long shadows across the valley that was now truly safe for the first time since her arrival. "You mentioned something you wanted to ask me," Felicity reminded him gently as they settled side by side, before Harrison interrupted. Vaughn's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with careful tenderness. "I was going to ask if you'd stay, not because you need protection or because you're hiding, but because you want to, because this could be your home, our home." She turned to face him fully, taking in the strong features that had become so dear to her over these past months. "Are you proposing, Vaughn Ryder?" Inelegantly, perhaps, he admitted with a wry smile. "But yes, I love you, Felicity Vargas or Florence Valentine, whichever name you choose to carry. I think I've loved you since that first night in Stockton when you smiled at everyone but couldn't quite make it reach your eyes. Tears welled in those very eyes now, but for once they were tears of joy rather than sorrow or fear. I love you too," she whispered. "And yes, I'll stay. Not because I need to, but because I want to, because I've found something here worth building a life around." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home, like the final piece of a long and difficult journey falling into place. The smile she gave him afterward reached her eyes completely, no secrets or shadows hiding behind it. Summer turned to autumn, and autumn to winter as Felicity and Vaughn rebuilt what Harrison's brief invasion had damaged while building something new between themselves. In October, she traveled to Sacramento with Vaughn to give formal testimony to federal authorities, officially clearing her name and reclaiming her inheritance. Rather than returning to Boston permanently, she arranged for trusted attorneys to manage her father's company, directing a portion of the profits to establish a foundation supporting young women seeking independence through education and employment. Their wedding took place on Christmas Eve, a small, joyful celebration in Stockton's newly built church, with Daniel serving as best man and Mrs. Weaver weeping happily in the front pew. Felicity wore a simple ivory gown with her mother's pearls, finally recovered from their Boston bank vault. Vaughn, resplendent in a new black suit, looked at her with such devotion that even the skeptical old-timers of Stockton whispered that they'd never seen a man more in love. "You don't have to be Felicity Vargas anymore," Vaughn murmured as they shared their first dance as husband and wife in the town hall afterward. "You can reclaim Florence Valentine if you wish." She shook her head, smiling up at him with complete transparency. "Florence died in that Boston fire. Felicity was born running, but she stopped running when a perceptive cowboy looked at her and said, 'You're safe now.'" Her arms tightened around his neck. "I'm Felicity Ryder now, and that's the only name I need." Spring arrived, bringing new life to Ryder Ranch, including news of their first child expected by winter. The ranch prospered under their combined business acumen, expanding to neighboring properties as they built a legacy they hoped would last generations. On warm evenings, they still sat in their porch swing, watching sunsets with Felicity nestled against Vaughn's side, his hand often resting protectively over her growing belly. Sometimes they spoke of the past of Boston society or Pinkerton investigations, but more often they discussed the future, planning adventures and improvements with the security of people who had faced their worst fears and emerged stronger together. "You ever regret it?" Vaughn asked one evening as they watched the sun sink behind the mountains. "Giving up Boston, your father's company, the life you were raised for," Felicity considered the question seriously before shaking her head. "I didn't give up anything that truly mattered. I gained everything: freedom, purpose, love." She placed his hand over the spot where their child kicked vigorously. "Family." As darkness fell and stars appeared in the vast California sky, Felicity's smile contained no shadows, no secrets, no fear, only the genuine happiness of a woman who had found her true home at last. The truth she had once hidden behind that smile had transformed from a burden into a strength, her past shaping but no longer defining her future. "You're safe now," Vaughn had promised that night in Stockton, and against all odds, he had kept that promise. Together they had built not just safety but joy, not just escape but belonging, a life neither could have imagined when fate first brought them together in a dusty saloon, where a woman smiled with her lips but cried with her eyes, and a perceptive cowboy noticed the difference.